Can you marry me just for one day? Jeremy turned. He had been walking toward his car in the late afternoon heat, keys dangling loosely in his hand, when a voice stopped him. It was quiet, almost hesitant, yet it carried through the noise of the mall parking lot with strange power. Like it was meant for him, and only him. He scanned the area, confused, until he saw her. A young woman, sitting near the entrance of the mall in a battered wheelchair. Her ash-colored dress was frayed at the edges. Her posture was tired. Her skin had the dull look of someone who hadn't slept well in a while. Her hair, dark and messy, fell around her face like it hadn't been combed in days. But her eyes didn't match the rest. They were wide and wet and honest. I just want to know what it feels like, she said, voice trembling but clear. To be married, to be loved, even just once, just for one day. Everything froze. Jeremy Anderson, young, sharp, perfectly dressed in a tailored navy suit, stood motionless, keys still between his fingers. His driver looked up from the SUV, puzzled. Across the lot, a few women gasped softly, recognizing him instantly. The billionaire CEO, the man from magazine covers, the one who dated models and signed checks bigger than some countries' budgets. And here, in front of him, was a girl who looked like she'd come from a shelter, asking to be his wife for a day. His heart pounded. She wasn't a model. She wasn't famous. She wasn't powerful. But she was bold. Her hands trembled in her lap, but she didn't look away. She was scared. That much was obvious. But she hadn't hidden her fear behind pride. She had let it show, raw and real. Jeremy took a step toward her. "Sir," his driver called out cautiously. Jeremy ignored him. He walked slowly toward the girl, each step heavier than the last. The sun caught the polished shine of his shoes. The SUV behind him beeped softly as the doors unlocked. Somewhere nearby, someone began recording with a phone. Juliana didn't move. She had spoken the most vulnerable sentence of her life. She had expected silence, maybe a smile of pity, maybe laughter, but not this. He stopped in front of her, then lowered himself down, suit and all, onto one knee. And for a long second, neither of them breathed. He looked directly into her eyes. "You are not a mistake," he said gently. "You're special, beautiful, bold, unique. You're not invisible. You are loved. The world just didn't know how to see you." She gasped. A tear slid down her cheek. People nearby froze. A few took pictures. One girl dropped her shopping bag. Jeremy reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn velvet box. It had been meant for someone else once. Someone who had left him when things started falling apart. Someone who hadn't stayed. He opened it. The diamond inside caught the sunlight. "Juliana," he said, his voice steady now. "Will you marry me? Not for one day, but for the rest of your life." The world stopped spinning. Juliana stared at him, mouth trembling. She was breathing like she had just run a marathon. Then she burst into tears. "Yes," she cried. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." Jeremy smiled. Not the confident CEO smile. Something softer, more human. He took her hand and slid the ring onto her finger. And in that moment, everything changed. Earlier that day, Jeremy's life had not looked like a romantic fantasy. In fact, it was falling apart. His company, once a growing tech empire, was on the edge of collapse. One final bid for a $500 million project stood between him and bankruptcy. He had poured everything into that opportunity: time, energy, reputation. And now it was slipping. "If we don't win tomorrow's bid," his finance director had said over the phone, "we're finished." The board is nervous. The banks are circling. Jeremy had dropped the call and leaned back in his office chair. The city glimmered outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. But all he saw were cracks. Everyone thought he had it all. Cars, suits, women, prestige. No one saw the anxiety, the long nights, the loneliness, the fear. So he left his office to clear his head, to walk, to feel normal. He did not expect Juliana. After she said yes, the crowd began to move again. Some people clapped. Others whispered. Some simply stared, not knowing what to make of what they had just seen. Jeremy stood up, still holding Juliana's hand. "From today," he said quietly, "you are not invisible." Juliana tried to smile through her tears. Why are you doing this? She asked. You don't even know me. He looked at her like the answer was simple. Maybe I don't need to know everything about you, he said. Maybe I just need to know who I want to become. He walked behind her and gently placed his hands on her wheelchair. Come with me, he said. She blinked. Where are we going? To give you the day you asked for. A full one. Their first stop was a salon. The pink sign above the glass door flashed in the evening light. Inside, hairdryers hummed and stylists chatted over the buzz of clippers. But when Jeremy wheeled Juliana through the door, silence fell. The staff froze. Good evening, one stylist said, voice a little high with shock. Jeremy smiled politely. This is my fiancée, Juliana. Please treat her like royalty. Juliana covered her mouth. She looked around as if to make sure this was real. They washed her hair with warm water and sweet-smelling shampoo, combed it gently, pulled it into a neat bun, added light makeup, just enough to highlight her face without hiding it. When she looked into the mirror, her eyes widened. She looked alive. Whole. Next, he wheeled her into a boutique. Clean white floors. Dresses lined up like artwork. Pick something, Jeremy said. Juliana hesitated. I can't. These are too expensive. You're not, he said. You're mine. The sales assistants, who had been eyeing her suspiciously, suddenly jumped into action. They brought gowns in shimmering gold, silver, emerald, sapphire, fabrics that felt like air. She chose a simple, elegant one that made her skin glow. When she came out, even the staff paused. She didn't look like the girl from the parking lot anymore. She looked like someone who belonged anywhere. Jeremy's gaze softened. Now, he said, we go home. Home? She asked quietly as he helped her into the car again. He nodded. To my house. If you still want to be my wife for more than one day. She said nothing, but her eyes said everything. Outside, the streets of Lagos grew darker. Inside the SUV, silence settled again. Juliana kept looking at the ring on her finger, half afraid it would vanish. She didn't know yet that the man beside her, who had just lifted her out of invisibility, was the one about to need saving himself. And she would be the only one who could do it. The mansion didn't look like a home. It looked like a secret world, carved out of stone, glass, and silence. As the SUV rolled past fountains and guards, Juliana sat frozen beside Jeremy, still wrapped in the expensive gown he had helped her choose. She kept touching the diamond on her finger like it might disappear. When the car stopped, Jeremy stepped out and gently lifted her into his arms again. She weighed almost nothing to him, and somehow she knew this wasn't about strength. This was about choice. He carried her inside, past polished marble floors and golden light spilling from chandeliers. The staff bowed. No one asked questions. No one dared. She felt like a dream he was determined not to wake up from. He showed her to a guest room, so soft and quiet, she almost cried. If you need anything, he said gently, just ask. Tonight, you're not a guest here. You belong. She blinked, overwhelmed. Thank you, Jeremy. You don't know what this means to me. But he looked at her differently, not with pity, not with charity, with something deeper. Maybe you don't know what you've done for me either, he said. Before she could ask what that meant, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and the warmth drained from his face. Excuse me, he murmured, stepping into the hallway. Juliana sat very still. Through the slightly open door, she heard the edge in his voice. Low, tense. What do you mean we might lose the company tomorrow? Her breath caught. She strained to listen. Yes, I know the banks are watching, he paused. No. We can't afford to lose this bid. Do whatever you can. I don't care how late it is. The call ended. Silence followed. When Jeremy returned, his steps were slower. His face had changed. He didn't look like the man who had walked into that salon hours ago. He looked scared. She tried to smile. You okay? He sat down in the armchair and didn't answer at first. Then finally, we're in trouble. My company. Tomorrow's bidding. That $500 million project. It's everything. Juliana's chest tightened. $500 million, she echoed, stunned. If we don't win it, we might collapse, he said quietly. I've poured everything into that bid. Everything. She nodded slowly. And you're telling me this why? He looked at her, tired and open. Because if I lose everything tomorrow, I want you to know that meeting you tonight is still the best thing that's happened to me this year. Maybe ever. Juliana felt her throat close. Her fingers curled in her lap. This man, who had lifted her up like she was royalty, was quietly breaking. And he had no idea. He had no idea who she really was. Because Juliana Jones wasn't poor. She wasn't just a girl from the mall parking lot. She was the only daughter of Adam Jones, the most powerful businessman in Africa. A man who controlled oil, tech, shipping, and real estate. A man who could fix everything Jeremy was afraid to lose with a single phone call. But Jeremy didn't know, because Juliana had never told. She had grown up in wealth. But her father raised her to value kindness, not status. She dressed simply, lived quietly. She wanted someone to love her without knowing her last name. Tonight, she had found him. And now, he needed her. Badly. Later that night, when the house was quiet and the hallway empty, Juliana rolled herself over to the side table. She pulled out a tiny old phone from the pocket of her dress. It was scratched. Small. Ordinary. It was the phone she used when she didn't want to be found. She dialed a number by memory. It rang once. Twice. Then a voice answered. My daughter. Juliana's eyes filled instantly. Daddy. Juliana. Are you all right? I'm okay, she whispered. But I need your help. A pause. This is about the man? She nodded through tears. Yes. And Daddy, I think I found him. Silence on the other end. You're sure? He doesn't know who I am. He doesn't care about money. He saw me. Just me. Her father breathed slowly. Thank God. But Dad, his company is about to collapse. He's bidding on a huge project tomorrow. If he loses it, her voice cracked. It might ruin him. What's the name of the company? Adam Jones asked, voice suddenly sharper. She told him. There was silence. Then, sleep well, Juliana. Tomorrow morning, he'll win that contract. Tears ran down her cheeks. Thank you. You finally found a man worthy of you. I'll take care of the rest. She ended the call and sat in silence. Her fingers touched the ring on her hand. What would he think when he found out? Would he believe she tricked him? Would he still love her when he realized he hadn't saved her? She had saved him? The fear inside her was real. Heavy. She had asked for one day, but now she wanted more. Much more. A knock came at the door. She startled. Juliana. Jeremy's voice. Can I talk to you? She rolled slowly to the door and opened it. He stepped in, eyes tired, shoulders heavy. There's something I've never told anyone, he said. Not my board, not even my best friend. She waited, heart thudding. When I was 14, he began, my dad lost everything. His company collapsed. Our house, our savings. One night, he looked at me and said he was sorry he'd failed us. The next morning, he was gone. Juliana gasped softly. Heart attack, Jeremy said quietly. After that, I watched my mom do everything to survive. I promised her I'd make something of myself. He looked up at her. I built my company from scratch, slept in my office, worked 3 jobs in university, and now it might all vanish in one day. Juliana's chest ached. She rolled closer. You won't lose, she whispered. He smiled weakly. You keep saying that. Why? She hesitated, swallowed. Because I believe in you. His eyes softened. Then, slowly, he knelt beside her again. Not for drama, not for an audience. For her. I didn't propose today because I felt sorry for you, he said gently. I did it because something in you called to me. I meant it. Juliana's heart beat wildly. I want this, he said. For real. Not just today. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Her voice trembled. I have something to tell you, she said. But can I tell you in the morning? He frowned slightly. Why morning? Because some truths need sunlight, she whispered. He studied her face, then nodded. Okay, tomorrow. He stood, turned toward the door, then paused. Whatever your secret is, it won't change how I see you. And then he left. Juliana closed the door and cried like her heart was breaking open. Tomorrow, she would tell him everything and pray he wouldn't walk away. The sun rose quietly over Lagos, brushing light against the marble edges of Jeremy's mansion. Inside, the house was still, peaceful, but Juliana wasn't. She had barely slept. Her heart beat too loud. Her mind refused to rest. And today was the day she would reveal everything. She sat in front of the mirror in her guest room, brushing her hair slowly. The woman looking back at her didn't look like the girl who had been in a mall parking lot the day before. She looked stronger, softer, more terrified. A gentle knock came at the door. Juliana, Jeremy's voice, lower than usual. Are you awake? She took a breath. Yes, I'm coming. When she opened the door, he was there in a dark blue suit, crisp and powerful, but his eyes were only on her. You look beautiful, he said. She laughed softly. I haven't even gotten ready yet. You don't need to try, he said simply. You already are. Her cheeks flushed, but then reality rushed back in. This was it. This was the morning she had to tell him. They ate a quiet breakfast together in a room full of sunlight. Then Jeremy lifted her gently into the SUV, placing her wheelchair in the trunk as if he had done it 100 times. As they drove through the noisy streets toward the bidding venue, silence filled the car. Juliana's fingers shook on her lap. Jeremy, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned to her. There's something I need to tell you. He waited. My full name, she said slowly, is not just Juliana. His eyebrows pulled together. My name is Juliana Jones, she said, daughter of Adam Jones. Jeremy blinked. Once. Twice. Then the color drained from his face. Adam Jones, he repeated. The Adam Jones? The billionaire? She nodded slowly. And last night, I told him everything. About your company. About the bid. He secured it for you. Jeremy's mouth opened slightly, then closed. His eyes filled so fast it startled her. Wait, he whispered. You saved me? She couldn't speak. She nodded. Jeremy leaned back in his seat, hand covering his mouth. His eyes stared out the window, but not at the city. He wasn't seeing traffic anymore. He was seeing her. Who are you? He whispered again. Before she could answer, the SUV screeched to a stop. Their driver turned around, panic written across his face. Sir, we have a problem. What is it? Jeremy asked. There's a truck, blocking the entire road. Jeremy sat up. A delivery truck had jackknifed across all 3 lanes. Smoke poured from one of its tires. People were shouting. Traffic officers ran around, helpless. Juliana saw it first. The truck was shaking. The tire was melting. Jeremy, she whispered, we need to move. Before the driver could reverse, a screech rang out. Metal scraped. The truck tilted slightly. Someone in the crowd yelled, Get back. It's gonna fall. Jeremy didn't wait. He leapt out of the SUV, grabbed Juliana's wheelchair from the back, opened the door, and reached for her. Jeremy, what are you doing? She cried. I'm getting you out of here. He lifted her fast, but carefully, ignoring the smoke, the screams, the panic. Cars behind them honked in confusion. People ran in every direction. He pushed her across the road as fast as he could. Just as they reached the pavement, a loud bang exploded behind them. The tire blew out. Smoke and dust shot through the street. Juliana screamed. Jeremy threw himself over her, shielding her with his body as debris clattered onto the pavement. When the dust settled, he looked up coughing. You okay? He asked, frantic. She nodded, shaking. Are you? He nodded. We're okay. For a second, she just stared at him. He had knelt for her, carried her, dressed her, believed in her. And now, he'd risked his life to save hers. Her heart could barely take it. Security officers came running. Sir, are you all right? Please, we'll escort you to the venue. Jeremy nodded, still holding her hand. They returned to the SUV. This time, the path was cleared. Traffic guards cleared away, flashing lights and sirens pushing back the chaos. Inside the car, silence returned. Juliana sat trembling, not from fear of the accident, from fear of what he might say next. Finally, Jeremy turned to her. So your father, he secured the deal? She nodded. You didn't tell me because you wanted to know if I loved you anyway? Her throat tightened. Yes. He stared out the window again. His jaw clenched, but his voice, when it came, was soft. And do you think I loved you because of your money? No, she whispered. Then why did you think I'd stop, just because you told the truth? Juliana didn't know what to say. I proposed before I knew your name, he said. Before I saw your dress, or your wheelchair, or your past. He turned to face her fully now. I fell in love with your courage, your honesty, your voice. Tears slid down her cheeks. He wiped them gently. Don't cry. Not today. She nodded. But Jeremy, there's something else. He raised a brow. What? Before she could speak, the driver called out, Sir, we're almost there. Outside, the state towers loomed large. Photographers waited at the gates. Reporters crowded behind barriers. Their moment of truth was just beginning. The SUV stopped. Cameras flashed. Reporters yelled questions. Mr. Anderson, is it true your company is failing? Who? Is this woman with you? Are you two engaged? Jeremy didn't answer. He turned to Juliana. You ready? He asked quietly. She nodded, heart thudding. He stepped out first, tall and calm. Then he turned and lifted Juliana gently into her wheelchair, lowering her like she was made of glass. Gasps rose. The girl from the parking lot. That's her. He brought her here. Juliana's face flushed. But Jeremy's hand stayed firm on the handles of her chair. Together, they entered the tower. Inside, everything gleamed. Crystal chandeliers, polished floors, suits, cameras, eyes. A hush fell as they rolled in. And then a new silence. From across the hall, a man stepped forward. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a crisp black suit. His presence made people part like waves. Juliana gasped softly. Jeremy stopped breathing. It was him, Adam Jones, Juliana's father, the richest man in Africa, and he was walking directly toward them. The entire room froze. And then he spoke. Jeremy Anderson, he said, your life is about to change. Jeremy swallowed. Juliana held her breath, and the whole world waited. Jeremy didn't move. Not when Adam Jones walked toward him. Not when the entire bidding hall fell into silence. Not even when the panel of directors straightened in their seats, visibly unsure what was happening. Juliana sat beside him in her wheelchair, her chest rising and falling too fast. Her fingers curled tightly around the armrests, and inside her chest was the question she dreaded since last night. Would her father accept Jeremy, or would he crush him? The room had fallen completely still. Powerful men who never paused during negotiations were now staring with the quiet awe people reserved for earthquakes and royalty. Adam Jones' voice was calm, firm, the kind of voice that built empires. You saved my daughter, he said, and not with money, not with pity, with your heart. Gasps followed. Reporters' phones came up like synchronized weapons. Lights blinked on. Mouths opened, but no one spoke. No one dared. Jeremy's throat was dry. His voice came out slower than usual. Sir, I didn't know who she was. Adam nodded. And that's exactly why I'm here. He turned from Jeremy to the boardroom. This morning, I reviewed all the proposals submitted for this $500 million project, he said. And while most of them promised returns, reach, and scale, only one of them reminded me of why I ever started in business. He looked back at Jeremy. The project goes to Anderson Global. The words fell like thunder. For a moment, no one moved. Then the room exploded. You've got to be kidding. Is that even legal? He married her for this, obviously. Juliana flinched at the angry whispers. Jeremy stood still. His jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. Adam lifted a single hand. Silence fell again. This is not about nepotism. It is not about marriage. It is about integrity, about vision. He stepped forward, looked directly at Jeremy. My daughter told me your story. How you worked 3 jobs, slept in your office, sacrificed everything. She said, Daddy, if good men like this are allowed to fail, then what's the point of any of it? Jeremy's lips parted slightly. I didn't ask her to do that. I know, Adam said. That's why she did it. Adam placed a heavy hand on Jeremy's shoulder. Take care of her. That's all I ask. Then he turned, walked away from the center of the room, and sat beside the directors, as if he hadn't just flipped the fate of an entire company with one sentence. When they stepped into the hall, staff from Anderson Global were waiting. One man nearly cried. Sir, we thought it was over. Jeremy gave him a tired smile. It's just beginning. But before he could say anything else, reporters swarmed the exit. Mr. Anderson, Did you marry her to save your company? Was this whole thing a staged engagement? Juliana, were you testing him? Juliana shrank slightly in her chair. She hated the way they stared. Not at her face, at her legs, her chair, her name. Jeremy stepped in front of her. He didn't raise his voice, but every camera pointed toward him the moment he began speaking. Enough, he said. Yes, Juliana is Adam Jones' daughter. But when I met her, I didn't know her last name. I didn't know her story. I only knew how she made me feel. He paused. Cameras clicked. I proposed before I ever knew who she was. Because I knew who she was to me. A reporter called out, "Would you have proposed if you knew she was the daughter of a billionaire?" Jeremy turned and looked at Juliana. She looked at him like the rest of the world had faded. If I had to choose between the contract and her, Jeremy said, I'd choose her. Every time. Juliana's breath caught in her throat. One by one, the cameras lowered. One reporter, famous for her cold questions, put her mic down and smiled. That night, the mansion was quiet. No music, no guests, just soft lights in the garden and the sound of the fountain. Juliana sat wrapped in a shawl, her eyes staring into the water. Jeremy joined her, 2 mugs of tea in hand. He placed one by her side. You okay? He asked softly. She nodded. You? He smiled faintly. Ask me again in a week. They both laughed, tired. Then she said it, the one thing she hadn't yet. You almost lost everything because of me. He didn't even flinch. No, I didn't lose anything. I gained everything. But people will talk, she said. They already are. They'll say you used me, that this was all about power. Jeremy leaned back in the chair beside her. People talk when something challenges their comfort. Let them. Her voice lowered. I just didn't want to complicate your life. You didn't complicate it, he said. You completed it. Juliana felt her heart ache. How had this man, the stranger from a parking lot, become the most real part of her? You saved me, he whispered. Not your father. Not the contract. You. She looked away, blinking fast. And you saw me, she said, before anyone else ever truly did. He knelt again beside her chair. No audience this time. No cameras. Just a man and a woman and a question already answered once. Juliana, he said, will you still marry me? For real. Not for image. Not for legacy. She smiled through tears. I already said yes. But fine, yes. Again. He laughed. Forever. She nodded. Forever. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, and in that moment, the world felt still. But above them, someone watched. From a second-floor window, behind sheer curtains, Diana stood still. Juliana's nurse. Her second mother. Her most protective companion. And the one person who had never trusted strangers. Especially ones who came in fast with love and promises. She turned away from the window, jaw tight. This can't happen, she said. And slowly, she began a plan. She walked quickly through the hallways of the house, hallways she had roamed for years, past the grand portraits, past the trophies and awards, toward the guest wing. Inside, her thoughts raced. Jeremy was not just marrying Juliana. He was marrying into a dynasty, a name, a future she believed had to be protected. By the time she reached the parlor, she had already decided. If no one else would stop this, she would. Even if it meant breaking Juliana's heart. Even if it meant facing Adam himself. The morning sun crept through the tall windows of the mansion, casting golden streaks across the marble floors. The air was soft, the world silent, but inside Juliana's chest, a quiet storm brewed. She sat by the window, staring at nothing. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers lightly grazing the engagement ring still on her finger. She hadn't slept, not out of fear, but because the truth hadn't been spoken yet. And she knew, sooner or later, it had to be. Then came the knock. Juliana, Jeremy's voice, gentle, barely above a whisper. Yes, she said, her voice even softer. He entered without ceremony, shirt sleeves rolled, no tie, hair slightly messy like he too had spent the night awake. There was no CEO today, no billionaire, just a man with questions and a woman with answers. Couldn't sleep, he said, taking a seat across from her. Neither could I. Their eyes met, tired, full of weight. Then Juliana took a breath and finally said the words that had been pressing against her lips. Jeremy, I have to tell you the truth. All of it. He leaned forward, calm but focused. Okay, I didn't meet you by accident. I sat at that mall on purpose, in that chair, in that dress, waiting to see if anyone could see past all that. I didn't want pity. I wanted to feel loved, even if just for a day. His brow furrowed slightly, but he stayed silent. I lived my whole life hiding. Not because I'm ashamed, but because I needed to know, would anyone ever love me for who I am, not what I came from? Jeremy looked at her, long and slow, then spoke. And did I pass your test? Tears gathered in her eyes. You passed without even knowing there was one. He exhaled, visibly relieved. Juliana, thank you for telling me. It matters. But you didn't have to test the world to find love. Love was always going to find you. A tear slipped down her cheek. He reached out and brushed it gently away. I thought you'd be angry, she whispered. Angry? He gave a faint smile. Maybe if you'd waited another week. But no, right now, all I feel is grateful. Because I didn't just find a woman. I found a woman who believes in truth, even when it's hard. They sat in silence for a moment. Then she added, my father secured the contract. But not because I asked. Because I told him you were worth saving. Jeremy swallowed hard. I don't know what I did to deserve any of this. You were real. You didn't try to own me. Or fix me. You just saw me. He nodded slowly. Then I guess I was looking for you too. The hall was packed again. Only this time, there was no tension. Just anticipation. Juliana entered in a soft golden gown, her chair rolling silently beside Jeremy's confident stride. The reporters leaned in, snapping photos, murmuring. But they said nothing. They didn't need to. Adam Jones stood near the front, dignified and still, waiting as the documents were brought forward. Jeremy signed. Then Adam. Then the board. And the room erupted in applause. The deal was done. And then Jeremy stepped forward. I have one more thing to say, he said into the mic. He turned to Juliana, his voice shaking. I asked you to marry me once. And then again. But today, in front of the world, I want to ask you for the last time. Not out of impulse. Not out of pressure. But out of love. He knelt again. The room gasped. Juliana Jones, will you marry me, not just for a moment, not just because we survive, but because you and I are meant to build something together? Tears spilled from her eyes. Yes, she whispered. The cameras flashed. But to them, the world had gone quiet. That night, they sat by the fountain. There were no reporters. No suits. Just quiet. Juliana leaned her head on his shoulder. You could have lost everything. I didn't, he replied. I gained everything. She looked down at her hands. People will say things. That you married me for money. Let them talk, he said softly. People talk when a story is bigger than their minds. She laughed, then went still. Jeremy, what if I fall? Not literally, but what if one day this all becomes too much for me? Then we'll fall together, he said, and get back up, together. She smiled. He leaned his forehead against hers. You saved me, he whispered, before your father did, before the contract did. You saved me the moment you asked me one impossible question in that parking lot. She whispered, will you still be my husband? Not just for today, but for the life that's ahead. He smiled. 1,000 times yes. She breathed. One more time won't hurt. He whispered, yes, Juliana. Yes, forever. But high above, behind the golden curtains of the upper balcony, someone watched. Someone who hadn't clapped. Someone who hadn't smiled. Diana, the childhood nurse. The protector. The woman who had raised Juliana with love, but guarded her with something darker. Fear. And now, Diana's heart burned. This cannot happen, she whispered to herself. Juliana cannot marry a man from outside our world. Her fingers clenched the balcony railing. Then she disappeared into the shadows. Downstairs, Jeremy wiped a tear from Juliana's cheek. The large wooden doors creaked open. Diana entered, her expression tight. Juliana's face lit with surprise. Diana. Jeremy stood protectively. You think you deserve her? Diana snapped. You think love is enough? Juliana reached out. Diana, please. No, Diana said. I raised you. I protected you. I watched men lie to get close to your father. I've seen them fake love, and I see it now, too. You don't know him, Juliana said. I know ambition, Diana snapped. And I know heartbreak. Jeremy stepped forward calmly. Ma'am, with respect. No, she interrupted. If you ever hurt her, I will make you regret it. Juliana held out her hand. Diana, you taught me how to be strong. But love isn't weakness. Love heals. Slowly, Diana's face crumbled. I don't want to lose you. You're not, Juliana said. You're gaining someone who loves me too. Diana's shoulders slumped. She came forward, took Juliana's hand. If you break her heart, Jeremy nodded. You'll be the first to know. The next day, the wedding was quiet. Simple. Powerful. Juliana in a white gown, her hair in a bun. Jeremy in a dark gray suit. Adam Jones walked his daughter down the aisle, eyes full of silent tears. Diana stood beside her, proud and still. When Jeremy placed the ring on her finger, the same one from that mall, she whispered, "From one day to forever." He smiled, wiping her tears. "Forever, my love." The crowd stood and applauded. And as they kissed, it wasn't a fairy tale. It was something stronger, real, earned. But deep inside the mansion, something else waited. A shadow, a whisper, someone who didn't smile, someone who didn't cheer, someone not ready to let Juliana, the billionaire's hidden daughter, leave the world they built alone. And this person had a plan, one that could still tear everything apart. What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.